I would like to mention we invited someone to speak for Edna Anderson, the first poet laureate, but unfortunately they could not come. But our next speaker will be Evelyn Benson, which will do a brief introduction on poet laureates and her husband, the notable Don Benson, who is poet laureate emeritus. And I'd like you to give a big hand to Evelyn. And I guess looking at the time, I'd like to be going for cake about 10 after 8 or a little bit earlier. So we'll try to get in the open micers and also the raffle. We've got a lot of raffle material. Please give a big hand to Evelyn and Don. No.
Because I spent 27 years as a teacher at the high school, I thought I would start out tonight with a short history lesson. And I'm making sure that the mayor and our alderman, the councillor, pardon me, I'm of the old school. My dad was an alderman, I still call him that. This is how New Westminster came to have a poet laureate. Poet laureate, definition: an eminent poet appointed to compose poems for special events and occasions. New Westminster was the first city in British Columbia and the third city in Canada to appoint an official poet laureate, and the first city in Canada to appoint a poet laureate emeritus, which means for life. But how did the tradition get started, and how has it progressed through the years? Well, in the late 1990s, on a visit to Charleston, South Carolina, which had a poet laureate, New Westminster Mayor Helen Sparks was inspired by the concept. She later explained in interviews that the Queen had a poet laureate by tradition and that the royal city should be the logical city to lead the way in establishing that tradition in British Columbia. She also brought back a book of poetry about Charleston's history, composed by their poet laureate, and said, "This is what we should do." The first two New Westminster Poets Laureate were winners of an annual poetry contest with a local theme and held during Cultural Week. So the term of office was 1 year initially. Queensborough's Edna Anderson became the city's first poet in 1998, and the theme of the winning poem was the Great Fire of 1898. Don Benson was named the second poet laureate the following year. Over the following consecutive years until 2007, Don's award-winning narrative verse often appeared in newspapers, and several works were produced as video poems by Rogers Cable and Shaw Cable, and seen by countless thousands of people across Canada. Several of the works, including Queen of the May, Unknown Soldier, and Welcome New Canadians, were read annually at civic gatherings. Other works, most notably Tall Ships, received far-reaching attention. In 2007, Don Benson informed City Council that he felt it was time for a new voice, and he had decided to step down as poet laureate. In his opinion, the new poet laureate should be a woman who was a good communicator with a style of poetry different from his own. Don was a member of the 4-person selection committee, which named Candice James as the city's third poet laureate. Taking a page from other Canadian cities with a poet laureate, it was proposed that Candice would be the first to receive an annual honorarium, and the term of office would be extended to 3 years minimum. A commanding presence, a superb communicator, and a tireless worker, Candice James has proved to be a very difficult act to follow. We just got notified yesterday that Dawn will sit again on the selection committee for the next new Poet Laureate. The city asked Dawn if he would stay on as the city's Poet Laureate Emeritus. This appointment would be a lifetime position. That way the city could use his works from time to time without offending the future Poet Laureate. At the time, City Council wasn't aware that it had, by chance, appointed him the very first official Poet Laureate Emeritus in Canada. At the same time, Edna Anderson was also named Poet Laureate Emerita. Now there's part of your lesson, you see. Tus is male and ta is female. Okay, got it? Good. All right. In 2008, Dawn Benson was commissioned by the city to write the commemorative book, 150 Years of New Westminster Traditions, a copy of which is gifted by the city to all visiting dignitaries. I brought a copy tonight to show you, because you can't buy it in the stores. You can only get it at the Anvil Center at the Museum and Archives. And it is a history of New Westminster, including poetry along with it. So it's a combination history poetry book. So Dawn chose to do a poem about our historic paddle wheel boats on the river, and after we got here we decided instead we would do one in honor of Chief Larrabee. This is Dawn's poem, and it is called Salmon Song. Pacific Northwest natives would come from all around to canneries strung out along the shore to work for skookum money on the Fraser's fishing grounds in those teeming summer sockeye runs of yore. For the Haida and the bands up near the Skeena and the Nass, the trip down took from 10 to 20 days. They kept along the way to wait for summer storms to pass and explore the countless islands, coves, and bays. The native bands from Washington would make their way by horse, riding bareback, using bridles made of rope. They mostly traveled quietly and let time take its course and let their ponies walk or prance or lope. And then a buck would spread his arms and urge his mount to run. How they thundered down the Semiahmoo trail. Then they'd slow and smile and pat their horse and taste the summer sun. The swiftest horse was simply not for sale. When fishing on the Fraser, each native man would croon his salmon song. When once his drift was set, he knew the homebound salmon would hear his plaintive tune and swim, enchanted, into his waiting net. Seals were a menace. They'd devour a salmon's throat, and white fishermen would club them from the net. But a native man would free a seal, or put it in his boat and take it to his family as a pet. And they'd feed it salmon fish heads. In days, they'd have it tame. The seal would soon become a family member. They'd take it out canoeing and assign a fitting name. There'd be tears when they released it in September. It's been 100 years since the Fraser knew those tears. Those canneries and fishing camps are gone. But if you listen closely, when the sockeye run is here, can hear a distant